We're called to confront. Do you believe that? I mean, that sounds kind of scary to me. I don't know about you. But for many of us, we don't really like confronting things because it's difficult or it's awkward or something like that. You know, in this message series, Called Out, we're talking about how God calls us sometimes out of places of comfort and calls us into things that are different. And this week, we're going to talk about how God sometimes calls us to confront, whether it's things in our own lives, or relationships, or other things. My name's Jon. I'm one of the pastors here at Stillwater, and I'm just so glad that you joined us for worship online this weekend. Last weekend, Pastor Jordan did an awesome job of kicking off this brand new series, and I'm just so excited to see how God is going to use this in my life and in your life. I've been praying for you today that God would be speaking to your heart as you hear His words and consider what it means to be called to confront certain things in life. You know, for some of us, maybe we're nervous about confrontation because we've done it before and it hasn't gone so well. It's kind of blown up in our face. Or maybe for others, we were confronted a lot earlier on in life, sometimes very badly, and we have just some painful memories. We say, you know what, I don't need any of that confrontation stuff in my life. I want to get rid of all of that. Most of us, I would say, would tell you that we don't like confrontation. I mean, why would you want to live with constant conflict in life? That just doesn't seem like a good way to live anyways. But for some of us, we might even thrive on confrontation at times. Not in every aspect of life, but maybe a specific aspect. Like maybe for you, you're one of the folks that when you read the news online, you kind of skim the article and you skip right down to that comments section. So you can find some complete idiot that you can start fighting with, right? And you can tell them just how dumb they are. And you go on and on about this. Maybe you like that kind of conflict. Or maybe there's other parts of your life where you say, you know, I shouldn't get drawn into this, but I just keep getting drawn back into this. Maybe it's the conflict with the person at work, or that person in your family that's always irritating you, or something like that. Can confrontation be done well? Does it have a place in the life of the Christian even? You know, on a larger scale, it's an interesting week to be talking about conflict and confrontation. We plan out our message series of ways in advance, but this week seems particularly timely, as I'm sure for all of us, we watched the news and our hearts hurt this week as we saw conflict and confrontation and pain and evil right on our very own screens. And I want to assure you that as we talk about this topic this weekend and say that we are called to confront, I want to assure you that we are not endorsing the violence, the lawlessness, the evil that we've seen in our nation, not just this past week, but even this past year. Whether it's in Portland or in DC or in Dayton, whenever folks gather to break laws and to vandalize property and to hurt or even kill others, this is not the way that God calls us to confront. I want to be clear that I'm not endorsing that in any way. But you know, it would be easy for us to sit back and say, see, that's what happens when people confront. It's always bad, and we shouldn't do it because we might end up like those folks. And I don't believe that's true either. I don't believe that. There are right ways of making your voice be heard. There are right ways of addressing the evils and the problems in our world. And you know, I believe that for us as followers of Jesus, we should be the best at confrontation. Tragically, we sometimes aren't. Sometimes we're no different than the people who do it worst, in fact. And I believe that God calls us to something bigger, to something better than that, because we are called to confront in the right way. So today, I want to start us off first on a little lighter note, as we're going to look at one of the most famous stories in the Bible of a guy who was called to confront, and he didn't want nothing of it. Then after that, we are going to look at just a couple of points about confrontation. And then finally, we're going to wrap up and we're going to ask, what does this mean for us this week here in the United States, going through what we're going through at this time? So if we look back to Genesis, God called this guy named Abram. And Abram was called to be the father of this incredible nation, who'd be the nation of Israel. And God called his people, and eventually Abram's family, they moved to Egypt to avoid a famine. And there their family began to grow and multiply and multiply. And eventually this family became a nation. And this nation of Israel became large enough there, this group of people, that Pharaoh got intimidated and concerned about them. And so he enslaved them. It was a terrible evil. It should never have happened. And God's people were enslaved for 420 years. Imagine that. They cried out to God for help, and finally he responded by sending a guy named Moses. He sent Moses to go confront. Now, Moses was an interesting choice. I would have said he was probably a bad choice, but obviously God knew a lot better than me. Why was Moses a bad choice? Well, he was born as an Israelite. He was born at a time when the evil Pharaoh, was actually having Israelite baby boys be murdered. That's how intimidated he was by the Israelites. And instead of having Moses be murdered, his mother was able to sneak him off and put him in this basket that she had made and put him in the river. It was a strange act of faith, of desperation, really, knowing that there was nothing better that she could do to save her son. Well, as God would have it, Moses floated up to where the Pharaoh's daughter was down at the Nile River. And she found the basket, she opened it up, and inside there's baby Moses. So she goes home to Dad, to Pharaoh, and she says, "Look what I found, Dad, a baby. Can I keep him? Can I keep him?" And Pharaoh's like, "Well, you did pretty well with that pet rabbit that you had, so sure, why not try a baby?" I don't know how that conversation went, but it seems kind of strange to me. But anyways, Pharaoh's daughter ends up raising Moses as her own son. So he spends the first 40 years of his life living in the palace, having a very easy life, while all of his countrymen are enslaved. Well, one day Moses is out, and he sees an atrocity, an Egyptian who's just beating this Israelite slave, and it makes Moses mad. And Moses, he attacks the Israelite and he kills him. He buries him in the sand. He thinks he got away with it, but he didn't. Other people saw it. When Pharaoh found out about this, Pharaoh tried to have Moses killed, and so Moses fled. And he went to a faraway land called Midian, and there he met these 7 daughters of a guy named Jethro. And he would end up marrying one of these daughters and settling down there. He worked as a shepherd for Jethro. And so he had a different life than what he had before, but he had a comfortable life. He had the job, he had the wife, he had the kids. He spent 40 years living just like that. He thought that was how the rest of his life was going to be. But one day, everything changed. His job was watching sheep, and watching sheep's a pretty dull job. Every day it's still kind of the same thing. They're still standing there, they're still eating, they're still wanting to run off, they're still stupid. But one day, something incredible happened to Moses. It was incredible, it was unbelievable. In fact, he saw a burning bush. But not just any burning bush. The bush was burning and it wasn't consumed. The angel of the Lord was in it. And some people think this is actually an Old Testament appearance of Jesus. Now, this is such a big deal that I wanted to invite some of my friends to come and help tell the story. So I want to invite Lisa and Rusty and Gordo to come up right now. And they're going to help us to explain a little bit about this story of Moses and the burning bush. So I've got a little script here that we've put together for you all. Okay, so there we go. There we go, okay. So I'm going to need, let's see here. I'm going to need one of you to be God. And, well, I think the choice is obvious here. Lisa, you'll be God.
Oh, it's me. Hey, he picked me. Oh, man. She always gets to be God.
And let's see here. Gordo, we'll have you play the part of Moses, please.
Sure, you carry on a stick, and this is what you get.
And Rusty, you will be Moses' trusty sidekick and narrator.
So, Pastor John, tell me, what does a narrator do?
I guess we'll find out.
One day, Pastor John was giving out roles. One day, Moses was watching his father-in-law's sheep when he saw an unbelievable sight.
It's unbelievable! The bush is burning, but it's not burning up. This is a scientific anomaly impossibility. But there's no need to fear. Gordo is to the rescue.
Moses! Moses! Boy, my creation is definitely not getting any smarter these days.
One more try.
Moses, step away from the burning bush. Take off your shoes.
What?
I said take off your shoes.
My
For you are on holy ground.
Uh-oh.
Ooh, that's not so holy. Rusty, I need your help.
Ew, what is that? What? Let me fresh.
That's a little better. Anyways, I am the God of your forefathers, Abraham, Jacob, Isaac. Yes.
That's only 3.
Anyways, as I was saying,
Oh,
the bush is burning. I've heard the cry of my people of Israel. They're in misery because they're slaves in Egypt. And I am going to send you, Moses, to confront Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go.
Okay. So you want me to confront the big P, the Pharaoh, the Sphinx?
Fear not, Moses, because I am with you.
Well, technically you are everywhere, so you...
Oh, don't get smart with me, science guy.
Okay, look. So when I go to the big P and he asks, who sent me? Who should I tell him?
My name is I Am.
Okay, Mr. I Am. What if they don't believe me?
Well, what is in your hand?
Well, this here is my Super Staff 3000. Why, this baby not only tends sheep, it chops, it slices, it dices, and it's been known to split water molecules a time or two. I've got the upgraded version.
Well, you have not seen anything yet. Throw it on the ground.
Okay.
Well, that was a little excessive.
Moses! Something weird's going on with that staff of yours. Look, it turned into this beautiful...
Snake!
Oh, Moses, just touch it by its tail and it'll turn back into your staff again.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Moses.
Okay. I'm up.
So God showed Moses other miraculous signs that Moses would perform to show God's mighty power, so there would be no question that Moses was sent from God to confront Pharaoh.
Okay, listen, I got this little speech impediment. I'm terrible at speaking. And anyway, do you really want anybody to hear this voice? For how many years? Come on.
Moses, who made your mouth? Exactly. Don't worry about it. I'll do the talking for you.
Okay, well, okay, but can we be honest here? Can you just send somebody, anybody else? I mean, isn't that why we have Pastor Jon?
Moses, fine. I will send your brother Aaron with you, and he can help you talk. Now, get up. Let's get going before I start shooting more lightning bolts at you. Go.
Oh, brother.
Never a dull moment with those guys, is it? If you think back to the very beginning of that skit, how would you have felt if you were Moses? If you were Moses and you were there that day and you see this incredible miracle of the bush, what would you have done? For me, that would have messed me up. I'm here in a comfortable, cozy life, and God calls me to confront Pharaoh. Are you kidding me? Do you not remember that I was like #1 on the Pharaoh's most wanted list back in Egypt, right? You know, he's trying to kill me. And you're telling me now that I'm going to go back to Egypt and I'm going to confront a Pharaoh there in Egypt. I'm going to tell him, in fact, that he needs to let 600,000 Israelite men go. Just free the slaves. Yeah, I know they're kind of a backbone of your economy, Pharaoh, and you've been nervous about what they might do if they were free, but just God says to let them go. I don't know if I would have bought into that. And that was exactly where Moses was at, right? He was sent. Exodus 3:10 says, "Now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people, Israel, out of Egypt." This was a confrontation of epic proportions. It just doesn't get any bigger than this. And Moses would go and he would confront the Pharaoh and he would call down 10 different plagues on Pharaoh, right? It was crazy. Pharaoh was stubborn. He hardened his heart. And finally, after the plagues got worse and worse and worse, he decided to let God's people go. But Moses, he was nervous about this. And he made excuses, right? He said, he said, God, who am I? Who am I that you should send me? And then, who are you? I mean, will people really believe? I mean, what's your name even? Will people believe that you sent me to do this? The third excuse, what if they won't believe me? I mean, sure, God's just going to let us go out in the wilderness, right? We're going to be just fine. We're going to just take this little camping trip with you, Moses, to this great promised land where we'll all be good, right? What if they don't believe this? And God gave him the signs. The rod turns into the serpent, which, by the way, I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'm really hoping they got the box slid on tight on that guy, because I will be out of here if not, let me tell you. And then, so you've got that. You got his hand turns to leprosy when he sticks it in his coat. You've got all these signs that God gives him. And then Moses keeps on going with the excuses. And he says, well, I'm not good at talking. God, I mean, come on. How am I supposed to tell Pharaoh all this stuff when I can't even hardly put a sentence together? It's kind of an interesting statement, right? Because he says to God, or God says to him in verse 11, the Lord asked Moses, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people get to speak or don't speak, to hear or not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I'll be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you as to what to say. You know, ultimately, it doesn't really matter who speaks because it's God who's going to give him the words. He'll send his brother Aaron. God will send Moses' brother Aaron, but it will be God speaking through Moses. What if you actually believed that could happen? That if God himself calls you to confront something in your life or in the life of somebody else, that God could actually speak through you? And what if you resolved in your heart to not get into silly, petty confrontations unless you actually believed that it was God guiding you to do so? How would that change? I have a feeling that would keep us out of a lot of dumb arguments online. And I think also it would allow us to have some courage in confronting some serious things in our own lives and our own relationships. What if you believed that God could do that? Because I believe that. That's why I want to talk about Moses today, because I think Moses shows us that we are called and that God can and will be faithful to us. If he calls you to confront, he's absolutely going to equip you to confront. Have faith in him, trust in him, and do it his way. Finally, Moses, he's not fully sold yet. He goes, just send somebody else, right? Just send somebody else. Again, Moses pleaded, Lord, please send anybody else. This is classic conflict avoidance, right? I mean, hey, you got me, God. Like, I got no more excuses. I got nothing else, but no. Could we just please anybody else, not me? Just, anybody around that could possibly go do this. I'm scared. I don't want to do it. If you've been scared of having conflict, Moses knows exactly what you're talking about. And God knows exactly, because he's dealt with folks who are afraid of having conflict for a long, long time. And yet, he still works through us. Moses would go on to be one of the most incredible heroes in all the Bible because he says yes to this. He was bold and willing to do so. Imagine if Moses had shied away from the confrontation. Would God's people have been freed? Maybe. God would have had to send somebody else, though. And Moses would have missed out on the incredible blessing of being used by God to lead the captives into freedom. What an incredible blessing that was. Now, Moses' calling was unique. I mean, for example, I don't think that God is calling you to bring down plagues on your people you're confronting, right? Although you might want to send a few frogs or flies somebody's way, I get it. But that's not something probably for us today. Moses' calling was unique, but I think there's some things we can learn about confrontation. And I want to just hit just a couple of things, a couple of statements about confrontation that I think are so true in our lives. First of all, you can't change what you refuse to confront. I believe that this is key to living out God's call in our lives to confrontation. You're not going to change. You're not going to see change in an area of your life or your relationships if you refuse to confront it, if you don't have the courage to confront it. If you just keep tolerating, ignoring, maybe even encouraging the bad stuff, don't expect to see change. What's going to be the catalyst? If God is calling you to confront and you don't do it, why would you expect anything to change? We're called to do this. Maybe for some of us, our spending has gotten out of hand and our expenses are always bigger than our income, right? And we just keep getting deeper and deeper into debt. When are you going to have the courage to address it? When are you going to have the courage? Or maybe if you're married, you recognize your relationship is not what it used to be, and you got issues, and you know you need to go see a counselor to get some help, or to read a book together, or just to listen or spend time. But you're waiting on the other person. It should be her doing it, or it should be him doing it. No, it should be you. God's put it on your heart. He's not speaking to them on your behalf. He's speaking to you. Listen. Have the courage to do it. You can't change what you're unwilling to confront. Maybe it's an addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or porn or other sorts of things in our life that we're just unwilling to confront. And we just keep doing it and saying, yeah, I'll get to that someday. I'll go to AA someday. I'll get an accountability partner. I'll be courageous and tell a friend. I'll do it tomorrow. Doesn't work. You can't change what you don't confront. And for some of us, we just need to ask God for some divinely inspired courage. That instead of sitting here in fear and just tolerating the way things have always been, that we need to be courageous. And we need to say, God, would you help me? I know you've called me to confront, but I need your power. I need your strength, because honestly, I'm scared. I'm so scared to do that. Now, listen, you're not called to confront every wrong thing that you see in the world. If that were the case, you and I would spend all day, every day, calling out things that we disagree with or that God disagrees with. You're not called to confront everything out there. But in your life, you are called to confront it. And I believe that in the lives of people that you're close to, you're also called to confront it. If God has put you into trusting relationships with others, maybe people in your small group or close friendships or people in your family, that God often calls us to lovingly confront things in those relationships and in those lives. You can't change what you refuse to confront. You know, we oftentimes run away from problems when we see them. But I challenge you to do it differently. What if we ran to the problem? What if instead of running away from it, no, we want to run to it? Courageously asking God to use us, courageously confronting in the right way, and trusting that God will work through us. Be strong, be courageous, and do it in love. You know, for many of us, we're still living back in Egypt. We're still enslaved by so many bad things in our lives because we lack the courage to confront. I thank God that Moses had the courage to confront Pharaoh. What Pharaoh is God calling you to confront in your own life? Listen, Jesus died so that we can be set free. That's what he came here for, right? And whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Do you believe that? Because if you believe that Jesus died to set you free, then it may be time to confront some of those things in our lives that are not according to what he's calling us to. But listen, freedom does not mean that we just are rebellious and refuse to submit to any authority, just confronting all sorts of other things in life. No, we have to submit to authority in our own lives. We don't just do what we want. And when we are confronting things in our relationships, we got to be thoughtful in how we actually do that. Because the how matters every bit as much as the what when it comes to confrontation. How are you doing it? Not just what are you doing? Second thing, you can't have peace in your life if you are constantly declaring war. We're not called to a life of continual confrontation. That's not what I'm talking about. There's times where we got to be patient. There's times where we got to play the long game. Rome wasn't built in a day. All your relationships aren't going to be made right in a day. If you have parents, or if you have kids, your kids are not always going to do things right, and there's going to be a process of working with them over time. It takes patience. It takes endurance. Even for Moses going to Pharaoh, he didn't get a yes the first time. He had to keep on addressing this. And so there's an obvious tension, if you will, between these two statements, right? You might be saying, okay, so which is it, Jon? I mean, on the one hand, you're saying that you can't change what you don't confront, but on the other hand, you're saying that you can't have peace in your life if you're constantly confronting everything. You can't have it both ways, right? Well, this is one of the many reminders of how we need the Holy Spirit in our lives to help us to discern God's will and God's guidance. God, what are you calling me to confront? What are you calling me to address? What do I need to address today? What are some things that maybe I'm running from or ignoring in my own life or in my own relationships? Or what are some things out there that I need to speak to and I need to let my voice be heard? And what are the other things that I need to have some patience on and know that this is not the day? And look, I can't give you a magical formula for everything in your life, every issue in your life. That would be fake, phony. But what I can do is I can connect you with the one who leads us, who guides us, who helps us to discern his will. God gives you the Holy Spirit. When you say yes to Jesus, he lives inside of you. Ask him. If you're not getting an answer yet, keep on asking. Keep on pressing into God and saying, God, do you want me to address this? Or what is it you're wanting me to address? What is it I need to have my voice heard on? And where do I need to have just simply your peace and your patience? Let me ask you, which of those two statements is more convicting in your life? I'm guessing that's the one God is talking to you about today. Some of us, we need to have courage to confront some new things. And maybe others, we need to learn to back it off a bit at times. Whatever it is that God's saying, do it. Because it will be revolutionary. It will be a changing force in your life. James 1:5. If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. Ask him. He wants to give you wisdom to help you confront things and address things in your life. I believe that God is speaking to each of us today about things that we need to confront. He didn't bring you here to tell you what everybody around you needs to confront. He brought you here to tell you what you need to confront in your life. God's talking to you about you. So listen. As Jesus said, if anyone has ears, let him hear. And see, here's the thing about confrontations. Confrontations often fail because we say the right things in the wrong ways. We may often have a very valid point, something that needs to be said, and we say it all wrong. We don't deal with our own spirit and our own emotions and our own feelings ahead of time. And so we go in sometimes instead of going in love, we go in loaded for bear. And instead of going and confronting, speaking the truth in love as God calls us to do, we go and we hurt and we tear down and we do damage. It's so essential. It's so essential that we do it in the right way. I mean, Exhibit A is like, I don't know, every conflict that you ever see online, right? I mean, no joke. A few weeks ago, I was on a forum online. I was reading about what the best type of oil was for one of my vehicles, right? I like that kind of stuff. And I didn't have to scroll down hardly 2 swipes before I get to a place where one of the people is debating with somebody else and one of them's calling the other one Hitler, right? We're talking about oil here, right? It shouldn't even be that emotional. But how often do we say the right things in the wrong ways? Here's another thing that's pretty easy to live by. Don't spend most of your time confronting people that you don't know. There may be rare occasions where this is needed, but it's awfully rare. Confrontation is most effective in the context of relationship. I don't believe that God has called you to call out every wrong thing that you read online. Some of us need to get a lot better at scrolling and just keep on going, letting it go. Because some of us, we're wasting our time and our energy and we're damaging our witness by the stuff that we do there. If that's you, you gotta stop. This isn't how God wants you to spend your time. This isn't being a steward of your life and your voice. It's wasting it. And you're getting drowned out in all the arguments that are out there that you're participating in. You're not changing opinions, you're squandering your life. I pray that God calls you to something better, to something more holy than that. And you know, for the people who you do know, when you need to have a confrontation, have some courage. Instead of writing them a nasty email or text, why don't you go for coffee or give them a call? And before you do that, think about how you can say it lovingly, kindly. How would you want to be told this? Say it in that way. Instead of saying it with such a mean tone or something that just has them turn off the conversation before it even begins. As God calls us in Ephesians 4:15, instead we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who's the head of his body, the church. Jesus is our example. He's the head. How are you doing with your confrontations with that? I mean, if, God forbid, if we could just play your latest confrontation here for our online campus this weekend, and we could all just watch and observe it, how would you feel about that? Would you be proud? Would you say, yeah, that's how Jesus would have handled this? I bet for a lot of us, we'd shy away. I can tell you in my life, there's been plenty of times I'd be very embarrassed by that. I wouldn't necessarily want my last fight to be watched like that. It's convicting because Jesus calls us to do better. Speak the truth in love. Jesus gave us the gold standard on how to do this in Matthew 18. He said, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out that offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you've won that person back. Okay, that's step one. Go privately. Before you go talking to everybody else, before you start the rumor mill and the gossip and all that fun stuff, before you put them on blast in some stupid anonymous post on Facebook, just a random thing. No, you go privately and you talk to them. Have some courage. Have some respect to do that. I can tell you most conflicts that I've seen get upside down happen because we fail to obey Jesus' step one. Do that first. Second, if you're unsuccessful, take one or two others with you and go back again so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. So go with a couple other friends. And again, not to gang up on them, but to lovingly hold each other accountable and to lovingly hold that person accountable. In many of our recovery ministries, we have times like this, right, where we come and we lovingly confront, right? It's an intervention that we help folks to see the truth of what's happening. And then if that is unsuccessful, and most of the time that will be successful, that takes us to step 3. And it's a tough one, and it's a little tough for us to apply because the church operates differently than the temple did in Jesus' day. But he says this, if the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then, if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat the person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. Now, most confrontations will be fixed in steps 1 or 2. But sometimes we do need others, and maybe you need to come talk to one of the pastors about how maybe we could help or we could intervene. We do that sometimes because we want to be used by God to help deal with some of those things. I mentioned earlier in the message that we would talk a little bit about what it means for us to be called to confront here in 2021, living in the United States of America. Quite frankly, as a nation, we're doing pretty crummy when it comes to confrontation right now. It's been a rough week, a really rough week in our nation's history. And I want to show you some images in just a moment here. And for me, and probably for you, these images bring on some pretty strong feelings. And I want to be very clear about something. I'm not equating these images with one another. They're different situations and different things. They're different for a variety of reasons, but they have something in common, and that is their evil ways of handling confrontation. The first one here is from Portland last year, one of the countless places where we saw protests against the horrible murder of George Floyd by an evil police officer. But matching evil with evil is not how we confront. You might notice the graffiti that says the only good cop is a dead cop. That's a lie. It's evil. That mentality has led to the death of many innocent people and even deeper divisions in our country. We should be able to stand up against the horrible evil of racism without turning to yet another evil. This next one is from last Wednesday. In the U.S. Capitol, one of the most sacred places in our land, did you know that 110,000 Union soldiers gave their lives in the Civil War to keep that flag out of our capital? Yet on Wednesday, it flew there because some people who disagree with the election did evil things, including flying this flag that has long been a symbol, a rallying symbol for white supremacists in this country. In the front of the man's head is a picture of a guy named Charles Sumner. He was an ardent abolitionist senator from Massachusetts. Sumner had made a speech that criticized slaveholders. And there in the halls of Congress, he was beaten mercilessly by another member of Congress who disagreed with him. In fact, the beating was so severe that he was unable to return to Congress for 3 years, and he would experience permanent, ongoing pain for the rest of his life. Appropriately, behind the flag is John C. Calhoun. John C. Calhoun once said about slavery, he said this, and I quote, "Slavery is, instead of an evil, a good, a positive good." My friends, that's a lie. It's also evil. That mentality has led to the oppression and even death of countless of our black brothers and sisters. And the evil is still prevalent today. Church, I ask you, is this who we want to be? Are these images who we are called to be? I fully respect the right of free speech in our country and the right to appropriate protest. But Christians, we're called to confront well. It hurts my heart to hear followers of Jesus attempting to justify these evil things for either side. Matching evil with evil is always wrong. So many of us have attempted to baptize the political party that we most align with. We've lost the ability to call out what is wrong. When the voices of your favorite political pundits are louder than the convincing power of the Holy Spirit in your life, then my friend, you are in grave danger. And no, I'm not talking to the other political party right now. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to me. I want to leave you with one final image that is in stark contrast to the others that we have seen. This is Patrick Hutchinson, who was protesting in London, and he was calling for racial justice in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. That day, Hutchinson saw some young black men beating a white counter-protester. Knowing that this is not the way to confront evil, Hutchinson took a risk. He charged into the crowd, and he picked up the man who was being beaten. Here's what Hutchinson said after the event: "I'm carrying him. My friends are protecting myself and the man on my shoulder. He was still receiving blows. You can feel people trying to hit him. There were people trying to protect him at the same time, carrying him over to the police. And I said, "Here you are." One of the police said, "Thank you. You did a good thing there." You know, in a terribly difficult time like this, I think Patrick should be a model for every one of us. For Patrick was not unwilling to courageously confront evil as we saw it, even when it meant confronting people who he agreed with, people who were on his side of the argument. He was able to see evil and address it as that. And for that moment, the world watched as a person bravely stepped in and confronted evil and did what was right. He spoke the truth in love, if you will. What about you and me? Do we have the courage to confront, but in God's way? Not in evil ways, but with God's heart, with God's love, with God's courage. I pray that we do. And if you don't, or if there's a part of your heart that doesn't, I'm going to pray for you in a minute. And I invite you to pray with me. Because I bet if we're all honest, we got some of this bad stuff backed up in our hearts too. And we need God's forgiveness, and we need His love to help us truly confront evil as He calls us to do. God, we give ourselves to you. We need you. We always do. But after a week like this, we are so aware of how we need you. Lord, I pray that you would confront the evil that is in our hearts. Forgive us for the times where we put politics in front of you, where instead of listening to your voice, we listen to the pundits. Instead of being shaped by your words, we're shaped by their ideologies. Instead of allowing your word to challenge us and our positions, we make excuses and we point our fingers at the other guys. Forgive us. Forgive us. Would you free us that we could confront in loving and appropriate ways, beginning with our own selves? Show us, Holy Spirit. Show me what it is I need to confront in my life this day. Make it clear. And God, would you give me the courage to do it and do it the right way? And Lord, I pray for those of us who maybe have some confrontations in our life that are not of you. They're just things we've started out of our own egos or our own messed up stuff. Forgive us, please. Heal us. Free us, that we can be joyfully obedient to you, God. That we can truly speak the truth in love, even when it's challenging. Lord, we give ourselves to you and pray this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.